Closer to the ranked choice voting tabulation results for the 2nd Congressional District between Democrat incumbent Jared Golden and Republican candidate Austin Theriault. State officials say they haven't quite wrapped up since they first began on Tuesday. As of earlier this afternoon, they've completely finished 4 counties. Counties they began with were more northern and had more hand ballots, which are harder to tabulate. Secretary of State and her team expect the rest of the counties, some of which are still being scanned, some being reconciled at this point, to be wrapped up tomorrow.
So in 2024, Maine saw higher voter turnout than ever before. That's really exciting. I think Mainers were really engaged. We saw high turnout in our smallest towns. Because you have those approximately 12,000 voters who picked someone or something or nothing, but an alternative to Golden or Theriault, that mathematically could overturn the election night result of Golden being in the lead.
Just a reminder, they are not revealing any partial results at the end of each day. We will keep you updated with the end results once the tabulation finishes.